Most people believe that distance destroys connection, that silence weakens love, that time erases emotional memory. But the human psyche does not work that way. What touches the soul deeply does not simply disappear. It hides in the unconscious, waiting, echoing, returning. There are bonds that logic cannot explain, bonds that survive rejection, separation, even betrayal. And the terrifying truth is this: when two souls recognize each other beneath the masks of the ego, the connection becomes psychological, spiritual, almost archetypal. You may believe they walked away from you, but somewhere in the hidden chambers of their mind, your presence still lives. In this lecture, you will discover why certain people can never fully detach from you, why the unconscious keeps pulling them back, and how your energy created an imprint far deeper than ordinary attractions. Listen carefully, because what you are about to understand may completely change the way you see human connection forever. There is a dangerous illusion modern people continue to believe. The illusion that the unconscious mind forgets what the soul has experienced deeply. You tell yourself that if someone leaves your life, if enough months pass, if silence grows between you like an abandoned road, then the emotional imprint disappears. But I tell you now, the unconscious does not function like a machine that deletes old files. It functions like the earth itself. Everything buried remains alive beneath the surface, waiting for the right season to rise again. You have experienced this yourself, though perhaps you were too distracted to notice it. A certain song begins to play in a crowded cafe, and suddenly a face returns to your mind with terrifying clarity. A scent passes through the air, and a forgotten emotion awakens like a sleeping animal opening its eyes in the dark. You walk down a familiar street, and memories rush toward you with such force that your chest tightens before your intellect can explain why. This is not weakness. This is the unconscious speaking in symbols. The people who truly touched your psyche are never stored merely as memories. They become part of your inner architecture. They shape the corridors of your emotional world, and this is why some bonds cannot simply be broken through logic, distance, or pride. The ego may say, "I have moved on." But the unconscious whispers something entirely different. In the silence of the night, you must understand something profound about human beings. Most relationships never penetrate beyond the surface personality. They are performances between masks. Two people meet, exchange roles, seek validation, and eventually separate without leaving a scar upon the soul. But occasionally, very occasionally, someone reaches beyond the mask you show the world. They touch the hidden self you protect even from your own awareness. And when this happens, the connection becomes dangerous because now it exists beneath language. Imagine a tree struck by lightning during a storm. The mark remains within the trunk long after the storm has vanished. The tree continues to grow, seasons continue to change, yet deep inside the wood the scar remains burned into its structure. Human beings are no different. Certain people arrive in your life like lightning. You may continue living, smiling, working, even loving others. But the unconscious still carries the mark of that encounter. This is why people become haunted by connections they pretend to have forgotten. A man may spend years convincing himself he no longer cares about the woman who transformed his inner world. Yet one unexpected encounter, one photograph, one dream, and suddenly the carefully constructed walls of the ego begin to crack. Why? Because the unconscious never agreed to the separation. The conscious mind tried to enforce, and many of you listening to me are suffering precisely because you misunderstand this truth. You believe your inability to forget someone means you are weak, obsessed, or emotionally damaged. No. Sometimes it simply means the bond reached a depth your intellect cannot control. The modern world worships rationality, but the soul has never obeyed rational laws. The soul speaks through symbols, emotional resonance, dreams, longings, and invisible attraction. Have you noticed how some people can disappear from your life forever, yet you feel nothing after a few weeks? And others, even after years, still move through your inner world like a shadow at dusk? That difference reveals everything. One connection touched only your routines. The other touched your unconscious identity. The tragedy is that most people spend their lives running from these experiences instead of learning from them. They distract themselves endlessly. New relationships, endless entertainment, noise, constant motion. But distraction is merely another form of avoidance. What is buried alive within the unconscious does not disappear. It waits. It watches. And eventually, it demands recognition. This is why you must stop asking, "Why can't they let go of me?" and begin asking a deeper question. What did this connection awaken inside them? Because the strongest bonds are not built upon physical attraction alone. They are built upon psychological recognition. Something within them saw itself reflected in you. Perhaps you awakened a forgotten part of their soul. Perhaps your presence forced them to confront emotions they spent years suppressing. Perhaps you became a mirror revealing truths they were not prepared to face. And this is why such bonds become impossible to destroy completely. The unconscious clings to whatever leads it closer to wholeness. Even painful connections can feel irresistible, because the psyche would rather suffer truth than live comfortably inside illusion. So when you wonder why someone cannot fully detach from you, understand this carefully. They are not only struggling to release a person, they are struggling to release the version of themselves that came alive in your presence. And once the unconscious has tasted that awakening, it searches for it endlessly. Like a wanderer, searching for a forgotten home in the darkness. People often imagine separation as a kind of death. They believe that once two individuals part ways, the emotional reality between them slowly fades into nothingness. But this belief is naive. Separation does not erase emotional imprints. In many cases, it intensifies them. What disappears physically often grows psychologically, because the unconscious mind feeds upon absence in a way the conscious mind cannot understand. You must observe your own life carefully to see this truth. Think of the people you encounter every single day. Most of them vanish from your memory almost immediately. Their words dissolve, their faces blur. Their presence leaves no lasting effect upon your inner world. But then there are certain individuals whose impact remains alive long after they have gone. Years may pass. Entire chapters of your life may change. Yet their emotional imprint continues moving beneath the surface of your psyche like an underground river. Why does this happen? Because the psyche does not measure importance by time spent together. It measures importance by emotional depth. One conversation can alter your inner world more profoundly than 10 years of ordinary interaction. One gaze, one moment of vulnerability, one painful goodbye can penetrate deeper into the unconscious than endless routine familiarity. The modern world misunderstands this entirely. People think emotions are temporary reactions, little chemical storms that eventually pass. But the unconscious transforms powerful experiences into symbols. And symbols do not die easily. They become woven into your identity itself. Imagine pressing your hand into wet cement. You may remove your hand, but the shape remains permanently impressed into the surface. Human connection functions in exactly the same manner. Some people leave only footprints on the surface of your life. Others leave fingerprints upon your soul. This is why you cannot always move on through sheer willpower. The ego desires control. It says, "I should be over this by now." But the unconscious is not interested in your schedule. It is ancient, symbolic, irrational. It continues processing emotional truth long after the conscious mind grows tired of thinking about it. You have likely experienced this contradiction yourself. Perhaps you ended a relationship years ago. Outwardly, your life continued. You worked, laughed, met new people, built routines. Yet deep inside, certain memories remain strangely alive. Not because you consciously chose to preserve them, but because the emotional experience carved itself into the deeper layers of your psyche. And here is what disturbs many people. Separation often magnifies emotional imprints because absence creates psychological space for projection. When someone is constantly present, the ego focuses on ordinary detail, flaws, frustrations, routines. But once they disappear, the unconscious begins transforming them into symbols. They become associated with lost possibilities, hidden desires, unlived futures, forgotten aspects of yourself. This is why a person may suddenly become overwhelmed with emotion months after a separation rather than during it. The conscious mind initially protects itself through distraction, denial, or pride. But eventually silence becomes a mirror, and in that mirror the unconscious begins revealing what was truly lost. Consider the experience of hearing an old voice message late at night. In the daytime, you may feel rational, detached, composed. But in solitude, when the noise of the external world fades, the emotional imprint returns with astonishing force. A simple voice suddenly carries the weight of an entire emotional universe. Why? Because the unconscious attached meaning to that person far beyond ordinary interaction. People fear these emotional imprints because they mistake them for weakness. But I tell you, they are evidence of your humanity. Only deeply feeling individuals leave profound marks upon one another. The tragedy of modern society is not that people feel too much. It is that they spend their lives trying not to feel at all. And yet there is danger here as well. Emotional imprints can imprison a person if they refuse to understand their meanings. Some individuals spend years chasing ghosts because they cannot distinguish between genuine psychological truth and unconscious obsession. The purpose is not merely to suffer longing endlessly. The purpose is to ask what the imprint reveals about your inner world, because often, the person who left the deepest imprint awakens something dormant within you. Courage, vulnerability, passion, self-worth, desire, pain you had buried since childhood. They became a psychological key, opening rooms inside your soul that had remained locked for decades. And once those inner chambers have been opened, you cannot simply pretend they never existed. This is why emotional imprints outlive separation. The connection altered your relationship with yourself. Even if the person never returns, the psychological transformation remains. Many people believe they miss the individual, when in reality they miss the version of themselves that existed during that connection. They miss feeling alive. Seen, understood, challenged, awakened. The unconscious does not cling merely to people. It clings to experiences of wholeness. So I challenge you to stop viewing separation as proof that the bond failed. Some connections fulfill their purpose precisely by transforming you permanently. The emotional imprint is not always a prison. Sometimes it is a scar left by awakening. And scars, if understood properly, become evidence not of destruction, but of survival, depth, and the terrifying privilege of having truly felt another human soul there. Are forces moving through human relationships that cannot be measured by logic alone. Modern people speak endlessly about attraction, compatibility, communication, and physical chemistry. Yet they ignore one of the most powerful realities of the human psyche, energy. Not mystical fantasy in the childish sense, but psychological energy. The invisible emotional force that passes between souls and leaves permanent consequences behind you. Have felt this energy before, even if you lack the language to explain it. You walk into a crowded room and feel immediately drawn toward one particular person, without understanding why. Another individual may be physically attractive, intelligent, socially admired, yet you feel absolutely nothing in their presence. Then, suddenly someone enters your life whose energy disturbs your inner world completely. Your thoughts become louder, your emotions sharpen. Your unconscious awakens as if struck by lightning, and what terrifies people most is this. Once such energy is exchanged deeply, it continues pulling at both individuals long after physical contact ends. This is why some people cannot fully escape each other. The connection no longer exists merely in memory. It exists as a psychological current moving invisibly beneath conscious awareness. Like the tide beneath the surface of the ocean, it continues influencing emotion, thought, dreams, and behavior even when both people pretend the connection no longer matters. The modern mind resists this idea because it worships rational explanations. But tell me honestly, have you never thought about someone moments before they unexpectedly contacted you? Have you never sensed emotional tension before a word was spoken? Have you never felt emotionally exhausted after being near certain individuals, while others filled you with strange vitality and inspiration? The psyche communicates far beyond language. Carl Jung once understood that human beings are not isolated islands of consciousness. We affect one another profoundly beneath the surface personality. Every meaningful encounter carries psychic energy. And when two individuals recognize something unconscious within one another, the bond becomes magnetic. Imagine two tuning forks standing near each other. Strike one, and the other begins vibrating without ever being touched. Human beings function similarly. When someone carries emotional frequencies that resonate with your unconscious wounds, desires, fears, or hidden potential, the connection activates something deep inside you. Suddenly you cannot stop thinking about them, not because you are weak, but because part of your psyche has been awakened. This is why ordinary advice often fails in matters of deep connections. People say, just move on, just forget them, just distract yourself. But the unconscious laughs at such shallow commands. You cannot simply silence psychological resonance through force of will. The energy continues pulling because something unresolved remains alive beneath the surface. And often, what pulls people back together is not love in the romantic sense alone. It is recognition, soul recognition. One person unconsciously sees aspects of themselves reflected in the other. Perhaps they see strength they abandoned long ago. Perhaps they encounter vulnerability they spent years hiding. Perhaps your presence forced them to confront truths they were desperately trying to avoid. This explains why certain individuals become emotionally haunted after losing someone significant. They may attempt new relationships, immerse themselves in work, surround themselves with distractions. Yet internally they remain psychologically tethered to the original connection. Why? Because no other interaction activated the same unconscious energy. Consider how people behave after experiencing such a bond. They replay conversations endlessly in their minds. They search for hidden meanings in old messages. They compare every new person to the one they lost. Even when pride prevents them from reaching out, their unconscious continues circling the connection, like a moth drawn toward a distant flame, And here is the deeper truth many fail to understand. The stronger the emotional suppression, the stronger the unconscious pull becomes. Human beings imagine they can bury emotional energy through denial, but buried energy does not die. It transforms. It emerges through dreams, anxieties, obsession, sudden sadness, emotional numbness, or unexpected longing during moments of solitude. The psyche behaves much like a river blocked by stones. Prevent its natural flows, and pressure begins building beneath the surface, until eventually it breaks through in another form. This is why people who insist they feel nothing often become the most emotionally consumed internally. The unconscious refuses to remain silent forever. You must also understand that your energy affects others in ways you may never fully see. Sometimes your mere presence awakens dormant parts of another person's soul. They may begin questioning their life choices after meeting you. They may suddenly feel emotions they spent years suppressing. They may become afraid because your energy disrupts the false identity they carefully constructed to survive the world. And this is why they cannot fully let go. Not because you cast some magical spell upon them, but because your presence altered their psychological landscape. Once the unconscious has experienced a certain depth of resonance, ordinary interactions begin feeling empty by comparison. So I challenge you to stop reducing human connection to surface explanations. There are invisible energies shaping your relationships every single day. Some people drain your spirit, others awaken it. Some connections imprison you in illusions, others force your soul toward growth, even through pain. And perhaps the reason they keep returning to your mind, the reason they cannot fully detach from you, is because something within both of you recognized a truth far deeper than words. A truth the unconscious continues chasing like a starving traveler, searching for light in the darkness. Human beings suffer because they believe logic governs the deepest parts of life. They imagine the heart should obey reason the way a machine obeys commands. They say, if this relationship was painful, I should be able to walk away. If enough time has passed, I should no longer feel connected. If the mind understands the truth, the emotions should immediately follow. But the psyche has never operated according to such cold mechanical laws. There are bonds that become stronger precisely because logic fails to explain them. And this is what frightens people most. The modern individual worships control. They wish to categorize every feeling, explain every attachment, predict every emotional outcome. Yet some human connections emerge from layers of the unconscious so deep that rational thought becomes almost powerless against them. You have seen this in your own life. A person may know intellectually that someone is imperfect for them. They may recognize the conflicts, the distance, the incompatibilities. Friends advise them to let go. Their conscious mind agrees completely. Yet, emotionally they remain tied to the connection, as though an invisible thread continues pulling at their soul. Why? Because logic belongs to the surface mind, but deep bonds are created beneath the surface, in the unconscious realm where symbols, archetypes, fears, desires, and forgotten wounds all converge. Imagine standing beside the ocean during a storm. On the surface you see violent waves crashing in every direction. But beneath the chaos exists a massive current moving with silent force through the depths. Human consciousness works the same way. Logic operates upon the surface waves, but emotional bonds are formed in the hidden currents beneath awareness. This is why people often behave irrationally in matters of deep connections. A man may spend years building emotional walls, convincing himself he no longer cares, only to collapse occasionally after hearing a single familiar laugh. A woman may create an entirely new life for herself, yet still feel psychologically tied to someone she has not spoken to in years. The conscious mind becomes confused, because logic cannot fully comprehend what the unconscious has claimed as meaningful. And the stronger the unconscious connection becomes, the weaker ordinary reasoning appears against it. Now listen carefully, because this is important. I am not speaking about unhealthy obsession disguised as destiny. Many people confuse addictions, dependency, or fear of loneliness with soul-level connection. But true psychological bonds possess a different quality. They transform you. They force confrontation with hidden aspects of yourself. They awaken dormant parts of the psyche that had previously remained asleep. This is why such bonds become unforgettable. They are not merely emotional experiences. They are encounters with the self. Sometimes another human being enters your life like a mirror placed before your unconscious. Through them you suddenly recognize your deepest insecurities, hidden desires, unexpressed potential, and buried fears. Their presence disrupts the identity you spent years constructing. And once this disruption occurs, you cannot simply return to ignorance. Think about how often people attempt to escape these experiences through logic alone. They overanalyze. They create endless explanations. They convince themselves they are imagining things. But the more they suppress the emotional truth, the more powerful the bond becomes internally, because whatever the conscious mind refuses to confront sinks deeper into the unconscious, where it gains symbolic power. This is why dreams become filled with certain people long after separation. This is why random moments trigger overwhelming emotion without warning. This is why individuals who appear emotionally detached outwardly are often fighting invisible psychological wars within themselves. The unconscious continues speaking, even when the ego desperately tries to silence it. And perhaps the greatest mistake people make is assuming that logic should always dominate emotions. No, logic is a tool, but it is not the ruler of the soul. A life governed only by rationality becomes spiritually barren. The deepest experiences of human existence, love, transformation, creativity, longing, meaning, all emerge from dimensions beyond pure logic. Even myths and ancient stories understood this truth better than modern society does. Again and again you find tales of individuals drawn together by forces they cannot explain rationally. Why? Because humanity has always sensed that certain connections belong to something deeper than conscious choice. Alone now, this does not mean every powerful bond should be pursued blindly. Wisdom matters. Self-awareness matters. Some connections arrive not to comfort you, but to transform you through pain. Yet even painful bonds can become psychologically sacred if they awaken you from unconscious living. And this is why some people can never fully break the bond with you. Not because they lack discipline, not because they are weak, but because somewhere beyond logic, beyond pride, beyond ordinary understanding, your presence became woven into the structure of their inner world. You became associated with awakening, with emotional truth, with the terrifying experience of feeling deeply alive. And once the soul experiences such recognition, ordinary logic begins feeling like a candle attempting to overpower the sun. So I challenge you to understand this carefully. Stop reducing human connection to simple formulas and rational calculations. The unconscious is vast, ancient, and infinitely more powerful than most people realize. Some bonds survive because they were never created by logic in the first place. They were formed in the hidden chambers of the psyche, where the soul recognizes something eternal within another soul. And once that recognition occurs, time, distance, and reason themselves begin losing their power over the human heart. So now you begin to understand why certain bonds refuse to die. The unconscious does not measure connection the way the modern world does. It does not care about appearances, distance, pride, or the number of years that have passed. It remembers emotional truths. It remembers who awakened something within you. And once another soul touches the hidden architecture of your psyche, the connection continues living beneath the surface like fire beneath ashes. Perhaps this is why some people keep returning to your thoughts without invitation. Perhaps this is why they cannot fully erase you either. Because the bond was never only between two personalities. It was between two unconscious worlds, recognizing something familiar, something unfinished, something deeply alive. But here is the question you must carry with you. After this lecture ends, when someone cannot break the bond with you, is it truly because they miss you? Or because your presence forced them to meet the version of themselves they can no longer forget? Think carefully about that. Because many people spend their entire lives running from mirrors that revealed too much truth about who they really are. And perhaps tonight, in the silence after this video, you will begin seeing your own connections differently. Perhaps you will finally understand why certain souls continue echoing through your inner world, long after they have disappeared physically. If this lecture awakened something inside you, then remain here with me on this journey into the depths of the human psyche. Subscribe, because there are truths about the unconscious most people will spend their entire lives avoiding. And I want you to write below not merely what you think, but what you have truly experienced. Tell me about the bond you could never fully explain, the connection logic could not destroy, the person whose presence altered your inner world forever, because sometimes the stories we fear, speaking aloud, reveal the deepest truths about the soul itself.